Hello everyone, it's time for an English lesson, and today with you Anzhelika Buravenko from school number 219. Today we shall continue talking about health problems and some diseases, and you will have a little bit of grammar, but don't be afraid, it won't be boring. So look here please, look through the text and tell what happened to Steve one day. Well, can you name the problem? Can you say it? I think you guessed it right. He fell ill and stayed in bed. So let's see more closely to the text. What tells us that he was ill? So in this passage we have some symptoms. To feel ill, he was pale, he had a headache, he was sneezing, coughing, he had sore throat, temperature was high, and he had a fever. Well, all these are symptoms of a bad cold. Well, I think every one of us had such a situation. Well, it isn't very pleasant, I think, but still. And now look at this text more attentively. Well, I think there is something wrong with it. Can you see it? Well, you're absolutely right. The text has the wrong order of the passages. Well, let's think. How can we improve it? Okay. So, if we read this passage, we can see that Mr. Johnson, it is a doctor, Mr. Johnson is always asked to come when somebody is ill in the family. So in this passage we have the general information about the doctor and the situation when he is called in. Well, and here we have the last passage. We can see, and the doctor said, "Steve, you have to stay in bed," and then he added, "if you want to avoid serious complications." Well, I guess it's the end of the text. Well, and here are two passages in the middle of the text, and there is something wrong with them as well. So if we do like this, change them, so it seems to me it is better when doctor, the general information, when the visit of the doctor, and the problem he has to solve. Well, he comes to a patient to listen, to examine, and to give some prescriptions and recommendations. Now, look at this part of the text. We have two passages here, and complete the sentences according to this text, to these two paragraphs. Well, Mr. Johnson always come when somebody is ill in the family. Well, we can write down here, he is always asked. Well, number two, then the recommendations are given. You are absolutely right. Well, next sentence we have, some medicines are taken by the patient. And the last sentence, Steve was diagnosed with a bad cold. Look at these sentences. I guess you may say that there is something wrong, not wrong, but something with them. Well, is asked, recommendations are given, medicines are taken, and Steve was diagnosed. When we talk, we normally say somebody does something or somebody did something. Well, and here we have another situation. Well, these sentences are written in passive voice form. Well, do you know what is voice? Every person has voice. I have voice, you have voice. What is voice? Voice, it's with the help of voice we make sounds, we speak, we do noises, whatever. But can you imagine that in English grammar, even a verb has voice? Actually, two forms of voice. Let's look at this chart. There are two special forms for verbs, and they are called voice. We have active voice and passive voice. When it is important to say that someone performs an action, we use active voice. For example, He opens the door. He is a subject, and his action is opens, and he opens what? What is object of his action? It is the door. So, active voice, someone performs an action, and it is important that someone does something, or is doing, or has done, whatever. Well, but if we are talking about passive voice, it is action what is important in this situation, not the doer or the subject. It is action itself is important. So look, the door is opened by him. We had object in the first variant, and here the door becomes the subject. We have subject is opened by him. Well, and how can we form these passive forms of English verb? Let's look at the formula. Well, we have the verb to be and V3. Do you know what is V3? We'll talk about it later, but now let's speak about to be. So, what grammar tenses do you know? What can you name? I guess you know them. Let's look. Present or past simple, present continuous, past or future perfect. Well, these are English grammar tenses. Well, and the verb to be has its form in every of these tense. And what is V3? Let's look at it. V means verb. You know what is verb. It is an action. Well, here we have verb. And 3 means past participle. What is past participle? It's an action that has already been done. Well, you know that verbs in English can be of two forms, regular and irregular. Well, when the verb is regular, we add ed ending, and when it is irregular, it has its own form in past and past participle form. Well, let's look. Asked, listened, opened, consulted, visited, prescribed. Here are regular verbs, and we can see the ending ed. Well, and here we have some irregular verbs: taken, written, told, given, seen, and bought. Where can you find these irregular forms if you don't know them? Yes, you can find them in the table of irregular verbs in every school book or in a dictionary. So here is the formula of passive voice verb formation. Well, let's look at this more closely. Here you have the table. Well, present simple passive and past simple passive. We have the subject who does the action or who did it. Well, we have the verb to be. The verb to be shows us the tense. Well, if it is present simple, we have am, is, are. If it is past simple, we have was and were. And we have action. Look, action is always two variants, ending ed or the third form of irregular verb, past participle. And look at the examples more closely, please. We visit a doctor every year. It is an active voice. Active. Who? We. What we do every year? We visit a doctor. And then look at the passive form. A doctor is visited every year. And also we can add by us. Well, passive voice is usually used when you don't know who does this action, who is the performer of the action, or when it is not important or it is obvious who did it or who does it. So we can use by us. Well, if you want to say who was this performer or who is this performer in every situation. Well, and now past simple. We have was and were, and look at the example. A nurse gave the medicine to the patient. A nurse She is a performer of the action, she is the subject. Well, and she gave the medicine. It is an active voice, active form of the verb. And then we have passive form. The patient was giving the medicine, and we can add by a nurse or by the nurse. Well, here you see that the medicine is the object and the patient is the object. Well, and we can also say the medicine was given to the patient by a nurse. Well, we can use both variants of this sentence. Well, and now let's move on. Here we have a big chart. Well, this is Mrs. Chen, and she washes dishes every day. Well, if you look at this table, you can see that we have subject, verb, and object. Well, a verb or action. Well, Mrs. Chen is the subject. She does this action, washes the dishes. How can we know what tense is in this sentence? What grammar tense? Well, we have here washes. Washes, we have ending es, and we can tell that this is the present simple tense, right? Because Mrs. Chen, she washes, she does washes. Well, and now the dishes object moves here to the first place. We have our ending, and we know that it is present simple, and we use are washed by Mrs. Chen. How can we know what tense should we use? So look at this form of the verb, and then you will know that the verb to be has the form are here. Why are? Because dishes is plural. A lot of dishes, every day she has a lot of dishes, she has a big family. So the dishes are washed. Next, here we have the sentence, our class won the first prize. What tense is it? Do you know this word won? Yes, you are right. It is the past form of the verb win. So our object comes to the first place. Then we know that this is the past tense, past simple, and we have was won. Our verb to be becomes was by our class. And we have the sentence, the first prize was won by our class. And now think, can we just say the prize was won? Yes, we can do it. It is obvious that our class won this prize, so there is no need to repeat it. Well, our class won. Well, let's move on. Read the sentences and tell, are they active or passive? And don't forget to pay attention on the tense. Is it present simple tense or past simple? How can we recognize them? We look at our action, at our verb. Well, here we have a family doctor visited him yesterday. Well, we have yesterday and we have visited ending ed, so I can suppose that it is the active form in past simple. Well, that's right. And you can see past simple active. Well, next, the patient was asked some questions. What tense is it? Let me remind you that to say what tense or to understand what tense is, the verb in, look at this was. You know that it is the verb to be, but in the past form. So we have was and we have asked, and I think it is past simple passive. Well, next, he consults his dentist every month. He consults. Subject and action. I think it is active voice. Well, yes, we are right. And the tense, present simple active. He consults. You can see this ending s in the first Well, number 4. Steve had a splitting headache yesterday. It is active. Why? Because Steve and he had. And we can name this tense as passive simple because we have the verb had and we know that it is irregular verb. So in past simple it has the form had. Next, she was diagnosed with a bad cold. You can see that the sentence is passive, so we can see was and diagnosed. What tense is it? Do you know? Yes, you are right. It is past simple passive. We have the verb was, and we know that to be in past simple has the form was. Well, number 6. Dogs are often used to help patients to get well quicker. Well, what do you think? I think it is passive voice because dogs are used. We have the verb to be and used. Well, it is present simple passive. Well, and the last one, the 7th. She always follows doctor's recommendations. She follows, well, it is active and we have here present simple active. Thank you for your work and let's move on to the next exercise. First, let's revise. Look at this table carefully. And now in your copybooks, I'd like you to rewrite the sentences. We have 6 sentences in active, and your task is to make them passive. Well, number 1. Mrs. Parker always asks the doctor to come when somebody is ill in her family. So, it is an active voice, and let's change it. We have the action asks and the object, the doctor. She asks who? She asks the doctor. So I think it will be like this. The doctor is always asked. And we use here present simple passive because we see here is present simple and here we have is always asked. The verb to be is here shows us the tense of the sentence. Well, number 2. A family doctor visited her yesterday. What tense is it? You're absolutely right. It is past simple tense. We can see the ending ed. Well, and we can see the object, her. Well, let's put the object to the first place and we have to change not her, but who? She. She was visited by a family doctor yesterday. Number 3. Mr. Johnson examined the patient. Well, we have here object, the patient, and what action? Examined. So, we have here past simple, and it will be like this. The patient was examined. Can you see? We have here ending ed, so we know that it is past simple, and that's why we have was in passive voice. Next, number 4. The doctor usually gives some recommendations to Steve. Well, we have the action gives, and let's look. Steve is usually given some recommendations. It is the passive form. Well, 2 more. Steve gurgles his throat 3 times a day. Well, and the passive sentence is the throat is gurgled 3 times a day. And it is a general information, and we can use by Steve at the end of the sentence, or we can avoid it. Next, Steve avoided some serious complications. Well, and the passive form of this sentence is serious complications were avoided. And we can add by Steve, for example. And now you will have a not usual task, change the sentences to make them active. So we have some passive sentences here. You can see that they are green. Well, and your task is to make them active. Don't forget that the tense of the sentence we can see in verb to be. Well, all diseases are caused by germs. What tense is it? we can see are, so it is present simple. Are you ready? Let's look. Germs cause all diseases. Well, we have presenter, we have the action, and the rest of the sentence. Medical checkup is done once a year. Here as well we have present simple because we have is here. We don't know who does this action, and we can speculate that maybe some people or my friend or someone else, anybody can do it, or anybody does it every year or once a year like this. Well, and here people do medical checkup once a year. So we just add who does it. Next, last month Susan was taken to the hospital. And again, we don't know who was it, who took her to the hospital, but we can speculate as well. And last month, mother took Susan to the hospital. Well, we add who did this action last month. Well, next, the temperature is usually taken when the patient doesn't feel well. A nurse, or it could be a doctor, or it could be a mother, usually takes the temperature when the patient doesn't feel well. The last one. These medicines were bought for a new patient. I don't know who bought these medicines for a new patient. Somebody bought. If you want to say that the presenter or person who performs the action is important, you can use active voice. But if it is not important, or you don't know who performs the action, or maybe it is obvious, you can use passive voice form of the verb and make up passive sentence. Well, it seems to me that passive form sounds more polite sometimes, and more formal, of course. Well, and don't forget about your home task. Here it is. Write 10 sentences using present and past simple, active and passive forms in your copybooks. Don't forget about the penguins. It's time to say goodbye. Stay healthy and see you next week.